If you're doing a push to get more students to learn STEM, but you don't have enough people who have the experience in those fields, or that skill set, and they're only going based on what they remember as K-12 students or what they learned in college, if it was a traditional teacher preparation program, and they're not doing any of their own professional development, or the district or the state isn't offering an alternative to that particular set of skills, how in the world do you think you're going to get fifth graders, seventh graders, 10th graders, and beyond to understand that? How are you getting upset when students aren't performing on standardized exams when some of the people who are preparing them don't have that skill set or knowledge base? That's like a medical doctor getting upset with students who don't pass the MCAT and they just entered into the profession without any real training. They just somehow backdoor came through. My daddy was a doctor, my mama was a doctor. Here I am. I've been around because I've heard of stories like that as well. Or let's say this, I'll get to higher ed. Follow me. If society is moving, and then if people are having access to public education, which is, I don't think children understand, I don't say adults too, I don't think they understand how precious it is to have public education. Because if you don't broaden your experiences and understand there's a bigger world outside of you, then you're going to stay limited. And I've been an advocate for changing up teacher prep and leadership programs, and at my institution where they no longer wanted me there. But anyway, so think about that. Now, I'll probably unpack that later. So now going to higher ed. So let's say, all right, you got through K-12. And when I went to Singapore researching, because I was trying to do my part in this problem, I was researching things to do, like how to enhance the teacher prep program and then leadership preparation in this area. And one of the ministers of education, he met with me and he was so funny. He was like, I said something about, oh, math is my area. And he was like, well, why not everything else? And I was like, well, because that's not what I went to school for. This is what this man said. And I couldn't help, and my mind has shifted ever since then. He said, you've spent 12 years learning the same subjects over and over at different levels. You should be an expert, or at least knowledgeable in all of those things. And he was like, you don't have to remember every single thing, but you should be able to pull from those experiences, and it shouldn't matter where you are placed. You should be able to connect the dots in any subject. He was like, if I'm in a math class, I should still be able to hear a teacher be able to reference something in history or science or literature, whatever they, because it's different over there. So whatever their things are. He said, I'm not expecting them to be an expert in that, but they should be able to reference that because they had 12 years, at least the minimum. I was like, wow. Now, if you don't know anything about Singaporean education, one of the top countries in education, and some of the most respected educators, they are on the same level truly, and not just in theory, how we are over here in the US, as doctors, lawyers, and higher ups over there. It is competition to be a teacher over there. It's not like a free for all that it can be over here. And they take their training very seriously. It is a profession. a little bothered by that for us. So I was like, wow, he is so right. So now that's K-12. So when people are like, oh, I'm not good at math or I'm not good at reading, like people get annoyed when I say I don't like to read. I didn't say I can't read, I just said I don't like it, but you better believe that I'm very good at it. One, I had all my life to learn how to do it. And then writing, I had to do that in school. So it's like, I get offended when you say you don't like math. You had 12 years. Now, it's easy to blame a teacher. It really is. Like, the teacher didn't teach me this. It was this, that, and the other. But even some of the worst teachers I've seen, at some point, you had to do some homework. You had to do something. Like, nothing was sinking in. All right. So let's say that. But then when you get to higher ed, this is the whole point. So let's say K-12 was a wash. When you get to higher ed, now I can only speak from the universities I've had contact with and the universities where some of my professor friends were teaching. I've asked them to tell me some things about the education departments. All education departments or colleges of education are not the same. Sometimes it depends on where they're housed, how they're set up. So this is just in general. So I don't need anybody saying, well, that's not how I learn. We're not talking about you. I'm talking about in general. First of all, colleges of education, a lot of them are focused on elementary education because it's a flood. One particular institution, at one point they were cranking out 1,000 graduates a year. It's interesting how we have a teacher shortage, but they were cranking out 1,000 teachers per year. Now that the teacher shortage is global, this was at one particular university. There are other factors in place. Some people don't want to leave and don't want to move and things like that. But then when you get into secondary, those spots are becoming few and far between. People are less qualified for those spots because, so I'll take myself for an example. I was on computer engineering track since middle school, really. Math, science track since middle school, and went straight into it for college. But then I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. However, I was like, when my mom was like, oh, you could be a great teacher, I took that as, oh, I'm supposed to be a teacher. That's really not what she said, but I was like, I don't want to do engineering anyway. But I had options. So people who were not like me, a lot of people I knew, they were like, oh, go be a teacher with all this knowledge. I'm about to come out making I think at the time like 70, 80 grand as a 21, 22, 23 year old. Whereas back then, I think the teacher's salary maybe was 30, if it was 40. I don't even know if it was 40. But to a 20 something year old, you're like, and I have any responsibilities. I was like, But and I don't want to say live in regret, because then if I did that, I wouldn't be able to talk now. I believe that it was important to go get that skill set, go get that money, go get that training, and then if your heart's desire to come back. But when you think about it, people who are highly attuned, skilled, gifted, I don't even want to say gifted, just good at it, love it, like it, fight for it, they're going to go for those jobs because it is about money. People can say it's not about money and this, that, and the other. That's a lie, because then they get into the professionals like, oh, teachers are underpaid, but I thought it wasn't about the money. So first of all, we have to be truthful. They have to be truthful. It's like, no, it is about the money to a certain point. Now, you may say, oh, I just want to help kids and things like that. And part of that is true. But when your lifestyle isn't at a decent level and you are working 2 or 3 jobs, then that takes a toll on what's happening in the classroom. So I think everyone needs to be honest about, it is about the money, and money should be a factor because money is a resource. So you know, you can have a heart of gold all you want to, but if you are struggling, then that heart of gold is not going to keep shining up all the time. So anyway, so secondary, mostly people who are strong in the sciences, the mathematics, the writing part, and just anything with the solid skill set, they're not going to the classrooms because their skill set is viewed as more valuable, hence why they make more money. Now, where am I going with this? You're like, all right, Dr. V, you probably lost me somewhere. Think about this. just like the school system was changing as society was changing, then the school system mirrored what higher ed was doing, because higher ed was preparing people for out in the world. If society is so fast right now, who's going to come in and change what's required for students to learn and what higher ed is requiring to train them as? When I was teaching, so many students fought me on understanding mathematics because I'm a little old school when it comes to mathematics. I believe you should do things with pencil, paper, and understanding it. But that's just me. It's like, understand why you're doing something. And this is a part of why I say everyone needs a STEM degree, because if you understand processes, systems, critical thinking, and endurance and perseverance, those things can transfer in real life. But let's just say, for the sake of learning it, because you got to teach somebody else. How about that? The number of students who would cry, complain, all of this because I gave them some math stuff to do, and then turn around because they're like, well, I'm just teaching second grade, or I'm just teaching fifth grade, or I'm just teaching seventh grade. Are you kidding me? So if we have this push for STEM, and then you have this mindset of the educator not having a certain level of skill set. So the question is, people who are going through the teacher preparation programs, colleges of education are failing. One of my schools completely shut down the College of Education because they weren't getting any people to come through. So now they had to partner up with another college. I mean, because, universities are big and then colleges are on the campus depending on, the structure. But for my institution, it was a huge one. So the university and then each little colleges. So my College of Ed had to partner with another college just to sustain. So I get all that to say is, I can understand two sides. I agree. One state was like, well, let's call in the veteran teachers and see how the ones who retired. I'm totally for that. However, these retired teachers, knowing what they see in these school systems, they're not coming to these classrooms. Now that's a whole nother issue. I'm not going to get on behavior because it's, again, you got to be trained to teach, to have classroom management. It's a real thing. If you're not that type of person that can command the room, there are certain strategies for classroom management that can happen. I didn't have any issues. I'll just be honest. So I love that option. However, then it comes to, well, I'm retired, so I'm not showing up every day, all day. I'll help, but not this way. So then that's where the innovation comes in. If people can sit at home, and people have their ups and downs about virtual learning and things like that, I don't have a solution for that because that's not what I'm talking about. But I do think it's there's something that can be done. I'm just gonna say I don't have the answers, but something with flexible schooling or some way it is possible to get that support. Then there are some schools talking about the veterans teaching the classroom. I love the veterans. Thank you for your services. However, if you're not understanding what it means to educate a whole child, and you're just looking for people to just show up in the classroom to be space holders, that's doing a disservice. And this is why people are nervous in society about Gen Z and Gen Alpha, the Alpha Gen growing up, if that's the model you're going to take. Now, do I think veterans have knowledge? Absolutely, because when they were going training, everyone wasn't on the front line. People learned very specialized skills. I think those are highly valuable as well. But just make sure they understand how to teach that to a whole child. And and the reason why I say that is because at one university where I was, we worked on a grant. It was a $10 million grant. And it was taking those students they had already had bachelor's degrees in science, mathematics, some kind of computer, some sort of engineering. And we took them to give them a teacher's master's and watch them as they entered the classroom. A lot of them did very well because we taught them how to be an educator, but then they already had that content knowledge. So it was a beautiful thing. Now, some of them didn't make it because I believe teaching is a gift and we can train you, But some people just don't have it. You go over there and stay, and you stay over there. We need you over there, not over here. But that is very valuable because they needed to understand certain things about the profession and how the profession worked, other than just showing up. Because just because you are good at math doesn't make you a great mathematics teacher. So that's what I'm saying about the veteran. So if there was a component in there about the profession, and I'm not talking about all the BS stuff and the nuances that for some reason has become over the top in the school system, like this what y'all fighting over, like, or you worried about a bulletin board, or to decorate the classrooms. Now those things are cool, but I digress. Then the option that I just don't like, I'm just gonna say it, is where you have college students teaching classes. Now, at the elementary level, some people may say that's okay, because for some reason, a lot of people get into education and want to teach the elementary kids is because, oh, I just love the kids, and two, well, I'm going to start here because when my kids are young, then I can move up. All kind of reasons. And it takes a special person to be an elementary school teacher. And I think a lot of people who are elementary school teachers should not be in the classroom. Because for some reason, I don't know why, and this is a tangent, being an elementary teacher is more than just playing with kids. They have standards in kindergarten, a level where they need to be. And I understand the relationship building part and character building, that is very important. But to find that person who can do that and teach a skill set, all 5 of them, or all the subjects at one time, very special person. And then that is not happening everywhere. So that is where we need some strong people. But then at the secondary level, we don't need people coming in because they want a new change in life, but they don't want to take time to understand the profession. So having college students come in before they even graduate. Now, in a traditional college of education space, you do have the interns going out, and I think that's very valuable. When I was teaching, when I went through the program, because I have 2 bachelors, one in fully in mathematics and one in secondary education. So in the education part, we had to go out into the fields, but we only did like observations, but we really got into the field like our last semester. The new institution where I worked, they had kids going out as early as possible. And I thought that was very valuable because a lot of them were like, oh, wait a minute, this is what teaching is? I'm out. Some of them I knew, hey, this is not for you. Exit stage left. And then others were like, they started building up and actually started learning what it looked like before they got into that. So that I agree with. But just leaving the kids in there and using them as placeholders, if they're not going to be trained well. And here's the thing, and then I know some people are not going to like this either. At 20, 21, 22, a lot of students aren't ready to be in the classrooms like that. I think they would be great as supplements, like addition, unless you find some truly, truly special ones, like you were made for this. And I have like teaching talent, like, you know how there are music producers out there that can go find talent. I really can't do that. I haven't been wrong, where there are some like, ooh, they need a little more time, or ooh, he or she has it at 18, 19. Like, it's just something. And then watch them over time, like, ooh, phenomenal. Then there's some like, you're not gonna make it. And that has been right. But anyway, but for the most part, think about when you were 20, 21, still in undergrad. Well, they're going back to like, think about 18, 19, 20. You got a lot going on. Are you fully responsible for the things that are happening in a K-12 school system when you yourself are trying to figure out who you are as a person? I remember I shut down a whole semester of teaching mathematics because I had to work on helping these students understand who they were at their core and started to process what was really about to happen. Because then you get people who are being triggered from their high school experiences, people who had never seen a diverse group of students, people saying, oh, these kids over there, or, oh, I'm sorry, I know you can't read because a student, was new from another city, but they heard their name as being a Hispanic or Latinx student, so they automatically assumed that they couldn't speak English. Come on. And I'm not saying it's everybody, but when you just toss people into a profession like that, it's not cool. So I'm not saying that the education system is exempt from it, but it's a public eye. It's like it's always in the public, because there are some pharmacists, some doctors, some lawyers who are biased, racist, can't handle things, are ticking time bomb, all these they got issues, but they're not. Well, I don't want to say they're not responsible for lives. They are, but it's just different for some reason. It's different when it comes to, because it's people's children, the innocent ones. And my children were the ones in higher ed, even the ones who are in leadership programs. Then you got people who are rushing to get out of the classroom so they can be leaders. So if you're skipping over things, if you're not taking time to be developed, and now you're in charge of a school, this is where the leadership part comes in. Now you're in charge of a school. You're in charge of a district, and you're making decisions about content areas where you've been afraid to touch, or money issues when you got your own money issues. It's a lot happening. So I said all this to say is, if people want to change how K-12 looks, higher ed needs to step in. And higher ed needs to be like, okay, what are we going to do, professors who've been chilling in their jobs? What are we going to do to make sure that these people are prepared when they go in? Other industries or other degrees or things like that, or jobs you can learn on the job. That's very true. There are a lot of things you don't really have to go to college for in this day and age, and I'm all for that. But when I say everyone isn't meant to go to college, or everyone doesn't need to go to college, but everyone needs to be trained and developed. Everyone needs to learn a particular set of skills. Why do you think the online course business, outside of the traditional online course business, so you can talk about coaching and, learn how to operate a business, why do you think it's $1 billion a day industry? Because people are looking for a skill set that they do not have, or that they forgot. But seriously, and these people are making all this money. So education is still $1 billion, probably $1 trillion industry. So I'm just throwing things out there. So while the solution is not just a teacher shortage in K-12, I'm going to say it's a higher ed issue too. Like one interview I listened to, and they had a commissioner on there. They had a superintendent of one of the wealthiest school districts in the world, in the country, and in my state on there. They had a former chief of schools on there, and a classroom teacher who left to go to law school because he was like, So you have these different people talking about certain issues, and one person brought up higher education, and that was the superintendent from the wealthy school district, because he was like, yeah, K-12, we got a lot of things to deal with, but who's asking higher ed to do something? And me being in higher ed, knowing that things could be a whole lot better on how you're preparing students and the rigor that needs to be put in place. Because here's the thing, students in colleges of education, and it is a blanket statement because every college of education is not like that, but for the most part, and again, now this mostly is experience, but this is also from talking with other institutions as well, they can go through a college of education without having a real test. Think about that. You can go through, outside of your gen ed classes, your last 2.5 years, you can go through all of that without taking the test. A lot of people can go through a master's level program without taking a test. So why is that important? If you haven't had the experience of being challenged like that, or understanding the pressures of an assessment and having to prove your knowledge, how are you going to really understand what a child has to go through when they're required to take these standardized tests? People have an issue with standardized tests. I don't. I just have an issue with how they're being used, because I'm like, well, how else are we supposed to know that you know this knowledge? Either you're going to demonstrate it or you're going to regurgitate it back out. I like both. Like, show me this, but then the most important part is, now how can we apply it? Now we changed that, cool, but as of now, standardized tests aren't going anywhere, so that's that. I just think they should just be used differently. And then there are some schools, when I didn't notice until I went back into some school systems, they weren't even having students take tests, but then they show up on the standardized test. Like, But anyway, my thing is about higher education. Higher education, what are the professors, what are the colleges of education, what are your roles in supporting the K-12 system? Again, I don't have all the answers, but I know a big part of it is training and developing and allowing innovation to happen. It is also money. People can say what they want to say. Oh, I have a heart for children, open a daycare center. Because it's more, you're in a profession and you deserve to have a standard income. I don't know, the average at the time of this in the United States, was it $50,000, $60,000? I don't know what it is. But why aren't you there? You got a full degree. I think one article said, and no, the commissioner on this interview said, she was like, we got to rethink some things, because a student who can spend 4 years getting a physics degree can go make 80, 90, in some cases, probably $100,000, depending on what they do. But that same person who spent 4 years getting a college degree, 2 years with a specialization in a profession, can barely clear the minimum. And I know some people could say, like, I knew some teachers that were making 80 grand in New York and California, but then it's like just standard of living, cost of living, whatever, in reference to other professionals. So I personally think if you beef up the skill set, you have to beef up the money, because income does correlate to impact and specialization. You can disagree, but it's a reason why a family practice doctor makes significantly different than an anesthesiologist. Both are important, both are up there, but when that skill set. So the people with the, and this is only for the STEM part. I know I did a whole thing, but for the people, let's say you're talking about, because STEM is a thing still, even though I still think people approach it wrong, but whatever. If you want more people to beef up with that particular set of skills, if you pay them a comparable salary to what they would be getting if they were utilizing their skill set elsewhere, part of the problem would be solved. So higher education needs to think about what their role is in preparing educators and leaders. And I don't know why leaders get like, no one pays attention to that, because who do you think the leaders are? A lot of them were former teachers, or people who just got into the school system real quick so they could jump up. Like a lot of men who come into, they go to elementary route, stay for like a year or two, and then they go straight into administration. That's another topic for another day. But it's not just men. It just looks quicker for them. But then you have women who are like, let me hurry up because I'm trying to climb this ladder. I won't get into that. So I hope all of that lands somewhere. I'm going to end it now. I'll do more. That felt really good to talk about. I've been avoiding this topic because I'm like, I am not in this space anymore. However, I'm realizing that my business in the leadership space, in the coaching and consulting space, is on training and development. And I still have a heart for school systems, maybe not teaching the content, because I'm like, we got enough people who can actually do that, but just understanding the big picture of what that means and how to move people forward. And it really does go with self-leadership. It's so deep in these streets about that. And it is a lot of personal things, a lot of trauma things that are underneath the surface as to why I believe the vibration of the education system is low vibe. But again, that's another story for another day. So to address the teacher shortage, it is not about just randomly throwing money to people to recruit the best and the brightest, because then they're not going to stay. So it's a retention issue as well. Then you got people talking about the different subjects that can be taught in schools. This is the last thing I'm going to say. Either there's going to be an overhaul again of what the curriculum looks like, or there needs to be different avenues for how students can learn. And it's already happening, but K-12, public K-12, I don't know how much longer it's gonna last. And that's why a lot of colleges of education are falling off at the university level, because this is what's happening. People are gonna get whatever degree they wanna go get. And because the bar is so low to enter into the teaching profession, and I'll be honest, I told a lot of my students, because of the requirements for them to become elementary teachers at this particular university, it was ridiculous. And I was like, just drop out of the education, go get a degree over here, come back and then go take the test for the district you'll get in. And then you can take an alt certification program to get your education credits. Because some of it is just ridiculous. Like higher ed it's ridiculous. Like the hoops they make students jump through, when there are alternative ways. So even higher, and so a lot of students don't just bypass the college of education, and then they go get the stronger degree, because if something happens to where they have to leave the profession or they just hate it, they can go somewhere else. But ask how many elementary teachers or people who just only majored in teaching, what else can they do? Where else are they going if they don't have to go back to school? So I'm going to end that here. Like I said, higher ed is the one. For me, higher ed needs to come to the table and be held accountable as well, and be part of this conversation and how to help solve the teacher shortage, because it's ridiculous. And there is no one size fits all. I think we're too deeply rooted in the traditional education space, but I do think it's time to shift. Mind Valley is an option to just see how that worked. Again, the reason why I'm like, I don't really have a full solution, because then you got the digital equity issue, home environments, but I do know higher education has a solution, especially equipping people. And if we talk about true innovation and creativity, it's in higher education, if people are still going to college now. And I'm gonna say higher education, I'll include alternative, because I think some alternative certifications, I think they involved higher education district level. I don't know, I'm just gonna stick with higher education. There's a conversation that can be had. All right, that's all I have for my little rant. And the reason why I had to do this one sort of off the cuff, because I wanted to make sure I didn't get caught up in paralysis analysis or overthinking. Like, oh my gosh, I have to be perfect, and then the video won't come out, or I overanalyze and things like that. I just wanted it out, and then I'll be doing more about this. All right, so thank you for listening and watching wherever you are in the world. Please leave your comments down below. I know some people are like, I will say, like, I've avoided certain topics because I didn't want to deal with comments, but then I had to remember, as a college professor, I was rated every single semester about my teaching, and a lot of the comments that I received were not about my teaching. They're about me as an individual, what I look like, who I was, versus my skill set. So I was like, wait a minute, I've been prepared for this. All right, that's all I have for you. Remember to be well, be empowered, be bold, and be brilliant. Until next time, bye.